welcome. You know, it's Saturday at noon and you can turn into the truth. And I'm John Gordon, where it is over 100 degrees here in South Florida today in West Palm Beach. Usually we're protected from extreme lows, but we have to pay for it in the summer with extreme highs. I don't think we're the only ones that are sweltering all up and down the East Coast. We're seeing record high temperatures. Stay cool, get your favorite beverage, an umbrella, and stay close to the pool. Well, you know, I had a young guy that was working for me in November, and after Trump won the election, he said, "Gosh, John, what are you going to talk about now that the election is over with?" Well, we have had no shortage of things to talk about. That is for sure. And this week is no different. Dan Bongino, a week ago, put out a very interesting tweet. Maybe you've seen it. This is what Bongino tweeted. "During my tenure here as the Deputy Director of the FBI, I have repeatedly relayed to you that things are happening that might not be immediately visible, but they are happening. The Director and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It is a priority for us. But what I have learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I have learned." Does that sound familiar? Is that not exactly what I've been telling you for the last 4 years, that this federal government is rotten to its very core? And do you think I'm just making that up because I want to be some kind of an alarmist or conspiratorialist? You can call me anything you want to, but you're not going to call me a liar. I am going to be a purveyor of the truth. And I hope Bongino continues. Do you know that they had to recruit, vet, and handpick 50 people to serve in Bongino's protection unit from within the FBI? He has people protecting him at his desk, where the only people that can be admitted are members of the FBI. That's kind of scary. And I think it's also very telling. But you know, this comes as no surprise to me. I've been calling for a cleansing in America for the last 3 years. I have encouraged that we shed light on the things that we can see right before our very eyes that we know we have not been told the truth about, things that we know or highly suspect that our own government is complicit in. Let's just have a quick review. November 22nd, 1963. Allen Dulles, Lyndon Johnson, and J. Edgar Hoover killed, covered up, and affected the assassination of the 35th President of the United States. It is so obvious and apparent today, and looking back and reading all the academic scholars' works on this, I don't see how any person with a brain, 2 eyes, and 2 ears and a conscience could draw any other fair conclusion. Yet we still have not punished, even in memoriam, the people that have done this. And I'll tell you, it has shocked Bongino down to his core. I'm not shocked. What I'm shocked about is that I'm surprised that he didn't recognize and realize it. Obviously, he's not listening to the truth on the John Fredericks Radio Network every Saturday from noon to 12, and again on Sunday from noon to 12. That's a short broadcast, and from noon to 2, and then we rebroadcast on Sunday along the John Fredericks Network, and we're also on cdmmedia.press. All right, so the JFK assassination, I've called the day that America lost its innocence, only to be followed by the assassination of RFK and Martin Luther King Jr. Did you know that the King family brought a civil action against the federal government claiming that James Earl Ray had not assassinated their relative and that it was part of a conspiracy? We're going to get into that in the coming weeks. I'm reading, I'm studying, I'm talking to people, and we're going to bring you some shocking news. It's not new news, but it's shocking in that the mainstream media has not chosen to inform us about it. But it's there. It's there for all of us to read and to study. What about the Nixon impeachment? Tucker Carlson said that it was a direct operation from the CIA to get Nixon out of office. He and Richard Helms were at each other's throats in a contentious conversation in the Oval Office. Nixon said, "I think I know who killed Jack." Richard Helms' expression and response, of which there was none, told everything. 6 months later, Nixon was hounded out of office. Aren't you curious? Are you curious at all about 9/11 and what really happened there? Do you remember how many members of the Saudi family were allowed to leave the United States on private flights when nobody else could fly anywhere really in the world? What about Building 7? Are you familiar with Building 7? It was excuse me, a really attractive, sparkling skyscraper that was part of the World Trade Center complex. And the World Trade Center collapsed, as you know, both buildings between 10 and noon. Well, Building 7 remained. And at approximately 6 p.m. that night, it came down after 7 hours. Architects and engineers who have looked at the Building 7 implosion have concluded that it was a controlled demolition. The government would have us believe that it was from debris that scattered about after the Twin Towers fell. These engineers have opined, no way. How about the $600 billion that went missing under the Obama administration? And of course, we can bring it to the current day. The Epstein files. We still haven't gotten what we've asked for and what we think we've been promised. It feels like, it smells like a cover-up. A private physician who was one of the world's foremost pathologists examined Epstein's body, and he concluded that 3 fractures in the neck were inconsistent with a hanging. Yet 2 nooses were found in Epstein's cell, and the guards who were supposed to be watching over him lied on their official reports. Now we're told that they were actually asleep. We're told that none of the cameras worked, but the one sliver of film that they did release to us last week, we played it here for you last week, shows what appears to be an orange jumpsuit ascending the stairs to Epstein's cell, the corridor outside his cell, at 10:40 that night. So many questions, so many diversions, so many disingenuous explanations. What about the 2020 elections? I worked on a lawsuit in Georgia for 2.5 years. I've seen the evidence. I've talked to the witnesses. I've played devil's advocate with the forensic accountants. I'm of the opinion, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not an opinion. It's a fact that I've observed with my own eyes, ears, and brains, that Fulton County was stolen by as many as 20,000 votes, maybe more. Susie Voyle, Scott Hall, and Bridget Thorne each say that they saw a pallet full of pristine absentee ballots, all scored by a printer, not touched by a human hand, no folds, no postage, no post office stamps, just a stack of pristine ballots in the State Farm Arena awaiting to be tabulated. 3,200 duplicate ballots on the Secretary of State's own website. 14,000 people, when you alphabetize them by their first name, have perfectly sequential voting ID numbers. Thousands of people registered at UPS stores, shelters, and homeless shelters, and vacant apartment buildings. Yeah, we're told the 2020 election, according to Brad Raffensperger, was the most secure ever in Georgia's history. Brian Kemp didn't have the authority to go look at it, and Chris Carr did absolutely nothing. Judge Brian Amaro, after ruling that the plaintiffs had made a prima facie case and ordering these ballots to be unsealed 9 months into the case, declared that the case was moot because of thrown out because of standing. Even though the Supreme Court of Georgia unanimously reversed Judge's decision, the case is now pending in a superior courtroom in Fulton County. The petitioners have still not been given access to the absentee ballots, where we believe the smoking gun probably existed, although I would be skeptical whether it continues to exist. I suspect that it has been destroyed. And what about the COVID origins? Anthony Fauci told us that it was developed in a bat cave 2 hours away from Wuhan. Then we later discovered that no, it actually did come from the Wuhan laboratory, a laboratory that the NIH, of which Fauci was in control and in charge of, was funding the Wuhan laboratory. Oh, how convenient. And then this pandemic was unleashed on the world by accident. Yet the scientists inside the Wuhan laboratory who chose to speak about it initially has disappeared, never to be seen or heard of since. And then we've learned in the last week about Russia. I don't think we've learned much of anything that we didn't already know, but all we have done is get confirmation from the intelligence community's own files, which Tulsi Gabbard had the courage and the guts to release. What it shows, ladies and gentlemen, is that a guy who worked in Clinton, or a lady actually who worked in Clinton's campaign, invented the idea. They put it in a paper. They outlined it in a paper. And the intelligence community was forewarned, and they forewarned Obama that the Clinton campaign was working on a plan of disinformation to take the American public's attention away from her 32,000 deleted emails, which, by the way, were under court order to preserve. And the Russia hoax was designed to cast aspersions on Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, paint them as colluding to affect the 2016 elections. And these were supposed to have emerged out of confidential conversations that included Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who then, now Congresswoman, was chairman of the DNC. Adam Schiff told us that he had incontrovertible the smoking gun evidence of the collusion between Russia and Trump, that he was going to release today. Oh no, tomorrow. Oh no, the next day. The next day has still not come. They do have the smoking gun, ladies and gentlemen, and the smoking gun is them and their correspondence and their emails and their deliberate attempt to undermine and disrupt and overthrow a duly elected president of the United States. And it went all the way to the Oval Office in December, after Trump had already been elected. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to talk about insider trading. And Nancy Pelosi says There's no insider trading in Congress. Here's her interview with Jake Tapper, who, by the way, I'm glad to see is coming over to the light side. He, if nothing else, is a pragmatist and a businessman, because he knows his goose was cooked, and now all of a sudden he hadn't been a part of any of this, but he's going to expose the bad doers. Here's his interview with Pelosi.
Let me just read what he said. I'm sorry that we had some sort of technical issue. Nancy Pelosi became rich.
Why do you have to read that? We're here to talk about the 60th anniversary of Medicaid. That's what I agreed to come to talk about.
Yeah, but I
and
wanted
what that means in the election.
I wanted to give you a chance just to respond. He accused you of insider trading. What's your response to that?
That's ridiculous. In fact, I very much support the stop the trading of members of Congress. Not that I think anybody's doing anything wrong. If they are prosecuted and they go to jail. But because of the confidence it instills in the American people, don't worry about this. But I have no concern about the obvious investments that had been made over time. I'm not into it, my husband is, but it isn't anything to do with anything insider. But the president has his own exposure, so he's always projecting. He's always projecting. And let's not give him any more time on that, please.
I mean, I just get sick of it. I am so sick of her. I'm so glad she is no longer the Speaker of the House. I mean, she is one of the people on this earth who I literally loathe and despise. I don't hate her. She's God's child. I refuse to allow myself to hate. But I really have a strong negative reaction towards her. I have got some breaking news for you, Ms. Pelosi. Insider trading extends to your entire family. It includes, first, your spouse, your children, your parents, and your brothers and sisters. But it can also extend to anyone to whom you tip off to insider information. So you're just lying when you say that there's no insider trading in Congress. How many members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, traded in pharmaceuticals the moment they went to a confidential security briefing on the COVID virus entering the United States? There were multiple people who traded based on that information. So when you say that it doesn't affect members of Congress, you are lying to us all. And I don't know that you're not a sociopath and that you don't actually believe your lies, because who could say it with such conviction if they didn't actually believe their own lies? It looked to me that you really believe that there is no wrongdoing among members of Congress when it comes to insider trading, even though you are the only person, perhaps, in the entire country who has managed to get 60% returns for the last 10 or 15 years, outperforming Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. Are you so delusional? Are you so lost? Is your soul so far gone that you can bear to face the truth and you will lie to the American people and go on television with Jake Tapper and just say that it doesn't affect you and doesn't affect your husband, when we know that you had inside information as obvious by your unbelievable, incomprehensible returns? I think there's adequate, and here's where I'm going with all of this. I've just given you a whole litany. You know, 10 years ago, people would have said, that guy's crazy. Today, we know that the people that are doing this, as I've just highlighted, are the crazy ones. You know, it all boils down to too much money and not enough oversight. This federal government has had, at our expense, our meaning you and me and the taxpayers of this country, way too much money, and they just fritter it away with no conscience and no regard for whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's only at best whether it's going to keep them in office for another term. And I think it's probably a lot worse and much more sinister than that. When you look at, you know, let's just think of Stacey Abrams for a minute, who got $2 billion and she's got $90,000 in microwaves to show for the money. Where's the other $1.99 billion? Here's the problem. Here's the problem I have with the Pelosi Act. Get real. I want to get real with you, okay? And a bunch of people are not going to like this. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make you mad. I'm just being honest with you. A congressman cannot survive in Washington on $175,000 per year. There are people that work in factories, manual labor jobs, union jobs, who are making almost that much money and cannot pay their rent, make their mortgage, and buy groceries. And yet we expect ordinary people to go to Washington and serve and get $175,000 a year. And now we want to further penalize them and say under the Pelosi Act that they cannot own or trade stocks. Count me out. I'm not going to Washington and sacrifice what I've worked for 40 years and be told that I cannot own or trade the stocks that I've worked my ass off and invested and risked it and saved to acquire. But I will tell you this, and here's the rub. It doesn't matter that we passed the Pelosi Act. It just doesn't matter because they're not going to enforce it. None of this stuff. We've killed the 35th president of the United States and it goes unaddressed. And the evidence is plentiful. There's more than enough evidence to convict these people that I've named and a whole bunch more. And what about the 100 people who lost their lives under mysterious and accidental, implausible circumstances? What about Dorothy Kilgallen? What about Ruth the railroad signal operator? He died in his hotel room the night before he was supposed to testify before the House Assassinations Committee. And what about the lady that worked for Jack Ruby in the nightclub who went to the authorities a day before the assassination and told them that the assassination was underway and was being staged, and they labeled her crazy and sent her to a mental institution? She was later run over on a state highway at night in Texas, and it looked like that it was intentional. I mean, it just goes on and on. 100 people, folks. Not to mention Lee Harvey Oswald. He was killed along with our president. And it is my informed opinion and belief that Lee Harvey Oswald did not pull a trigger. I don't think he was even in the sniper's nest. I think he was in the lunchroom where he was seen just minutes before the assassination, and he was seen minutes after the assassination, seemingly not knowing what had just occurred outside the building, sipping a Coca-Cola very calmly and nonchalantly. When the police officer and the manager of the school book depository ran through the break room, the cop said, "Who is that?" He said, "Oh, he works here." They ascended the stairs up to the 6th floor. And witnesses saw Lee Harvey Oswald at Jack Ruby's nightclub prior to the assassination. There are witnesses that saw him crossing the grassy knoll on his way to get into a car that looked like Ruth Payne's. Ruth Payne was his CIA handler, along with George de Mohrenschildt, who committed suicide with 2 gunshots to the head just a few miles from where I'm sitting. I mean, we've done it. We've talked about it. But I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. RFK, MLK, Nixon's impeachment, the $600 billion missing from the Defense Department during Obama's administration. Poof, it vanished into thin air. And the coup that they tried to stage against Donald Trump, and January the 6th, and the 2020 election, and the Epstein files, and the COVID virus, and the Russia hoax. And now they want to pass the Pelosi Act. BS. What a crock. Enforce the laws that we have. Tell us the truth of what you know. Let the sunshine in. Give us the government we demand. We demand a government that is founded on truth and ethics, morality, and the laws of the United States of America. And just because you can break them doesn't mean that you're not going to have to pay the price at some point. Go Dan Bongino, and I hope Kash Patel. And where is Pam Bondi? And thank God for Tulsi Gabbard. Mr. President, please, I implore you, I pray to you, for you, and pray that you will empower these people, this group of warriors that you have handpicked, and extricate the people from this corrupt, badly flawed federal government and surgically remove them like the cancer that they are. But you got to come clean with us. This stuff can't go on. And Bongino confirmed for us everything that I've been telling you. He told you it is rotten to the core. He just used a different choice of words. It has got to stop. It's not the country that I want to be a part of. It's not the country I want my children to live in. And it's not the country I want my grandchildren to be reared in. Not if we keep doing these dastardly, inexcusable things, and not if our own leaders are going to be so corrupt and watching each other's backs to the point that we can never forget justice. We can't even get the truth. But it starts with the truth. It starts with Tulsi Gabbard exposing Russia, Russia, Russia. Now we've got the goods. We have got the goods. We have got proof positive on Clinton, Obama, Comey, Clapper, and Brennan, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And they've got the goods on George Soros through his lieutenant, Leonard Bernardo, who was looped into the scheme and we believe helped fund it. It's time for Judgment Day. The bells are tolling. The American people need to make their voices heard. Stand up. Push back. Write your representatives. Write the letter to the editor. Talk to your parishioners. Talk to your pastor. Talk to your friends, neighbors, and relatives. Explain to them just how dire these circumstances have become and how sheer evilness has pervaded and infected and inflicted our federal government. And I don't think it's reserved to the federal government, because every bureaucrat in America is watching what's going down, and they're saying, oh, if they can get away with it, I can get away with it. So I don't like this guy. I'm just going to go use my power, and we're going to weaponize the district attorney's office. We're going to get an indictment on him. Oh, that would never happen. Fonnie Willis, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg. Don't you see? It's all about leadership. It's all about role modeling. And we've got some of the scumbags. Up to you to use your voice. Power. But if you sit on the sofa and you're more worried about your golf game today and your poker game on Tuesday and your shopping spree next week, I get it. I like to have fun. Just like you do. I have to have fun. I have to go play tennis to get all this frustration out of my system. Some days I do. Other days I just get more frustrated. But I'm telling you, folks, the mountain of evidence that has grown and has been now amassed, and through social media and through YouTube and through alternative sources of information. You cannot depend on the mainstream media. Shut off NBC, ABC, CBS, unsubscribe to the New York Times, Get rid of the Washington Post. Just put it, let's throw in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with it. They're already on life support. These liberal-ass newspapers and their publishers who are trust fund babies, who have never had to work a day in their life, and they're perfectly willing to feed at the trough. Like the New York Times has collected millions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars. Like Politico that collected $9 million in subscriptions from the federal government. Subscriptions that sold for $75,000 and $100,000 apiece during the Biden administration. What do you call that? I don't call it a subscription. You want to call it a subscription? Do you believe it's a subscription? What about the $3.4 million the FBI paid to Twitter to censor and cancel people who dared speak out about the vaccine? What do you call that? Just a contract? Some sort of a public service that they were performing? No, I call it a bribe. I call it control. I call it a government mouthpiece. That's what they do. Because they're on the take. They're part of it. They're in on the game. And your tax dollars are being funneled back to them. Oh, I forgot Butler. Wouldn't you like to know who orchestrated Butler? Wouldn't you like to know the circumstances? Wouldn't you like to know where Maxwell Urich is, who he is, and what role he played? Is Thomas Matthew Crooks really dead, or was it Maxwell Urich? It's going to be hard to find out because the body was disposed of and burned 10 days later. The evidence was destroyed. Did they do that to both people? I don't know. Who were the breadcrumbs that left the breadcrumbs of the cell phone visits to Crooks's residence? 3 visits traceable back to Gallery Place, where the government is known to have leased offices in that work, live, play area of Washington, D.C., Gallery Place. Who signed in with Thomas Matthew Crooks every time he went to the shooting range? Why did he have 2 cell phones? Why did he have foreign accounts? Why did he have apps originating in foreign countries? Why can't we find out who he was communicating with? Take the lid off, folks. Come on, Tulsi. We can take it. We can handle it. We'll be your warriors. We'll be in your platoon. We'll have your back. I think. I hope. It's time for the truth. It's time for light. It's a great disinfectant. It's time for us to know the answers to these very troubling questions. These are not trivial. These are not things that should be swept under the rug. These are not things that should go unredressed. These are not things that the perpetrators should be able to get away with just because they have some power. Yeah, it's going to cause a lot of dissension in this country when we see Obama legitimately doing a perp walk, followed by Clinton, Clapper, Brennan, and Comey. Oh, Comey, you know, the guy who just stumbled upon 8647. The lies, the deceit, the deception, the undermining of our laws and our Constitution. It can no longer continue. But it's going to take you and me to fight back. The American people have got to become awakened. And that's my job. That's what I'm trying to do here. I just have too small a megaphone. But I do get invited on radio shows across the nation virtually every day, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, and I'm trying to spread the word. And folks, I want you to know I have a wonderful life, a happy wife. I still have 4 operating businesses, 3 wonderful adult sons, 1 grandchild, 1 on the way. I'm in good health, knock on wood. I'm in a great place. Translation, I am not suicidal. But if something were to happen to me, just more collateral damage. I might be Epstein. I don't know. They're going to have to Epstein a lot of people because there are a lot of YouTubers who are on the hunt. A lot of them. But the YouTubers alone cannot do it. I'm telling you. The American people have got to demand transparency. Write a letter to the White House. Flood the White House mailroom with your letters and say, Mr. President, we love you. We also love the truth. Give it to us. Stop trying to cover up the Epstein files. I don't think that Trump did anything. I honestly don't. Clearly he knew Epstein. Clearly he flew on his plane. He says he never went to the Epstein Island. Don't you know the Bidens would have exposed him if he had? Especially in the last election. Don't you know Kamala Harris would have shown you the evidence? They've got it. They had it. They've got all the evidence that Trump's looking at right now. They've had it. I don't think Trump's in it. I really don't. I have no reason to believe that. But you're acting kind of sketchy, Mr. President. When people ask you the questions, you act kind of touchy. You act kind of defensive. You act like you don't want to talk about it. You act like you just wish it'd go away. And that's why it's not. Because the American people are demanding answers. Why are we demanding answers? It's not because we're voyeurs. It's not because we want to know who went to Epstein Island. It's not because we want to know who flew on the Lolita Express, even though there are a lot of people that do. I'm just saying that's not what I'm interested in. Redact all the names. I don't care. I've gone into my rationalizations and why I say that. There are a million different reasons why. Well, not a million. There are dozens why I don't think we should know the names. I think you run the risk of indicting a lot of innocent people whose names may be on a list that's not the list, because the list is the list that we want, and that list is of the people who had sex with underage children. That's the list that we want. But I'm even willing to forego that. They say, oh, well, we can't tell you who the victims are. We didn't ask you who the victims are. Redact the damn names. How simple is it? Quit playing us for fools. We'll never show you the videos because we can't show you the victims. We're not asking for the videos. We're not asking for the victims. What we're asking for are the damn people that did it. That's what we're asking for. But more importantly than that, I don't even care about the people that did it. Does that sound bad? What I care about are the people that organized it. What I care about is to know whether Epstein was a member of intelligence and whether our own federal government orchestrated this to suck powerful people into a honeypot so they could put them in compromising positions and then own them. Because that's everything my instincts are telling me occurred. And that's why we can't see it. Because we cannot run the risk of destroying our federal government that evidently is more sacred than the Ten Commandments, the Bible, and everything that God preaches. But I don't think we're going to sacrifice our federal government. I think we're going to sacrifice the bums that have done this stuff. And those are the people that I'm after. To me, those people on the list could be as almost as much of a victim as anybody else if they were sucked into it. Maybe their drink was tainted. Maybe somebody slipped something into their drink. Maybe they got them so drunk they lost their sense of place. Maybe they didn't know they were going to Epstein Island and introduced to provocative young sexy girls that were underage that they didn't know were underage. Because I can tell you that some of the girls, a couple of the girls' pictures that I've seen, I couldn't tell you whether they were 17 or 18. And that was the line of demarcation. So are you really going to ruin the careers, the lives, and the wives and the marriages of people that may have been sucked into this unknowingly, unwittingly? Unless you're Bill Clinton, who went there like dozens of times. We've already got his name. But you run the risk of tainting people like Dershowitz, who was falsely accused and had to spend months and years defending himself only to eventually prove that he had never gone to Epstein Island and he was falsely identified. Those are the people I'm worried about. So the list is not all important to me. What is all important to me is knowing, was Epstein on somebody's payroll? Was this a government operation? And they say, oh, well, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was notoriously a Mossad agent. So it must be Ghislaine that's the Mossad agent, and maybe she was the mastermind behind it. Maybe she and Epstein were working together. Maybe he worked for the CIA. Maybe it was a joint effort. Ooh, now the stakes just got a lot higher, didn't they? We're going to affect the international balance of power because of our bad decision making. That's speculation. But there is reason to speculate. Robert Maxwell, an agent of Mossad, nobody disputes that. Ghislaine Maxwell is his daughter. She cozies up to this guy named Epstein, who the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida in a Senate confirmation hearing said that when he was asked, why did you go soft on Epstein? He said, because I was told to, because he is a member of intelligence. That's a lot of smoke. That's a lot of smoke to not lead us to a fire. And it's the inferno they do not want us to see. I think we need to see it. I think we need to see it all. I think we need to expose the people who have broken the laws of our country and the laws of God. Damn you. You have stained this country forever. And you're in the process of destroying the greatest country in the history of man for your own rationalizations that only really rationalize your lust for power and your greed. That's what it's about. That's why Lyndon Johnson wanted to be president, because he was about to be thrown off the ticket and because he was about to be investigated for his business dealings with Billy Saul's Estes, rather. And so the easiest way to kill the investigation was to kill the president. Get the power. Never heard another word about the Billy Saul Estes investigation. I think the American people have a role in this. I think we're much too comfortable. I think we're much too willing to look the other way. I think it's much too convenient to say, well, I don't really believe in all these conspiracy theories. Get out of your denial. Get real. Go inform yourself. Go to the library and check out some books. Order a couple off of Amazon. Go on YouTube and look. Inform yourself. And you will confirm everything I have told you here today, and that is the truth, as I know it and believe it to be, with no agenda, wanting nothing, desiring nothing, expecting nothing, except a moral country in which to live and raise my children and family and see my grandchildren thrive. But God's not putting up with this. I can tell you, this ungodly behavior will not go unnoticed, and it will not go unredressed. It would be a lot simpler and a lot better if we chose to address it. That's what I want you to do right now, today. Take the action items. So, the unemployment numbers were not good yesterday. The markets are down, and they're going to get worse because we are into the August-September doldrums. And just as bad unemployment news arrived on Friday. So the markets are tanking. Jerome Powell has gotten what he's wished for. The beginnings of a downturn in our economy. The market was off 540 yesterday. Had a little uptick on in the middle of the week, and then turned negative on Thursday and Friday. Down off of its highs. We got up to 45,000 points. Now we're back down in the mid 40s, low 40s, 43,700, thereabouts, 650. So I, as you know, have been a defender of Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. But I have also agreed with President Trump that it was now time to ease credit. The housing industry is on its heels. Unemployment has remained high. And Jerome Powell is obsessed with curing and whipping inflation. I think he has been right all the way up until now. In this last month, in the last week of the month, we should have gotten a 25 basis point reduction in the Fed funds. We should have gotten the interest rate relief that President Trump has been asking for. Trump wants 3%. Well, that's just Trump being Trump. We're not getting 3%. Don't kid yourself. It ain't going to happen. Maybe over the next 2 years. But that would be too dramatic, and that probably would catapult us into some serious inflation. Especially considering that the tariff revenues are just now beginning to kick in. We have not really begun to see what impact they may have on inflation. Kevin O'Leary and I are in the same camp. It's probably good that Powell and the Fed have kept interest rates somewhat high. They're nowhere near historical highs of Jimmy Carter's 21%. The interest rates got up to 9%. Now they're back down to in the 7% range. Some short-term money is in the 6% range. So we are due for a interest rate reduction. The common belief is on these places you can go and place a bet, well over 60%, maybe 70% of gamblers think that we will see a quarter of a point and maybe a slight chance of a half a point reduction in September. I think the Fed should act proactively, not wait for the next Fed meeting. I think we should get a rate reduction in the month of August. It would scare the markets, but only for a short period of time. They would learn to like it a couple of days later, and the markets would adjust. That's what I think. And Trump is right that Powell waits too late. He waited later than he should have to raise interest rates. Now he's dragging his heels to lower them. He lowered them a half a point right before the November election, which just reeked of politics. I can't defend him on that, even though I was glad to get the relief. But that didn't cause inflation to spike. And so I think easing is now time. I think we'll see it in the next month. Hopefully, maybe it could happen before then. I doubt it will. That's considered kind of an extraordinary measure that, as I said, could shock the markets. That's going to cause them to be reticent to do that. But interest rate relief is on the way, and then watch out. This economy is going to rock if he hasn't waited so late that we enter a downturn, unemployment spikes, and people lose confidence. We're not there yet, but you better catch them all before they fall, because what we're seeing is the very beginnings of just that, I do believe. So hopefully we'll keep tracking it. And we're going to come back and talk to you. I don't think I talked about one thing I left out. I'm sure I bummed you out today. I'm sorry. I don't mean to bum you out. Look, things are good. Trump's working on peace abroad. He's working on reconstructing our economy. Crime is coming down in America. The jobs numbers were looking good until Friday. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not doom and gloom I'm talking about. It's these horrible things that our own federal government are complicit in, and they won't even tell us about United 23. Have you heard about it? It was the fifth plane in 9/11, and I've been looking into that, and there is overwhelming evidence that there was a group of hijackers on United 23. It was scheduled to leave Kennedy, for Los Angeles. They were actually taxiing out to the runway. Fortunately, they had a long taxi to make. And just before they got to the taxiway, the captain of Flight 23 said that the ground controller came on the radio and uttered words he had never heard before. The ground controller said, "All aircraft, please be advised, we have been ordered to evacuate the building. You are now on your own." So you have all these airplanes that were approaching Kennedy, probably had just taken off from Kennedy, and that were on the ground at Kennedy, about to take off, who now had to figure out how to get either back on the ground or turn around and come back or taxi back to the gate without the assistance of air traffic control. Now, I've been flying since I was 16. That sounds like a horrible thing. Fact of the matter is, it's really not. I mean, weather permitting, I could take off today in my plane and fly pretty much anywhere in the country without being on a flight plan, without ever talking to a controller, and without risking collision with another aircraft. It's just called see and avoid. It's called VFR flight. You fly under visual flight rules. You just look outside the window for obstacles in aircraft. That's how I learned to fly. That's how I flew for the first 10 years. I didn't have an instrument license, so that was the only way I could fly. Now, granted, I was flying a small airplane that went really slow and didn't go very high, but the fact of the matter is that left me in what I call bubble land. That's where all the cowboys are, below 10,000 feet. And that's why the FAA have defined restricted airspace around many of the nation's larger airports to keep Bubba the hell away. That's right. And so if Bubba stays out of the controlled airspace around major airports like Atlanta and New York, LaGuardia and JFK and Newark and Boston and Chicago and LAX and Las Vegas, yak. There are, I think, 13 or 14 Class Bravo airports in the United States, which are the most densely populated airports for air traffic. And so there are very specific flight rules. You can't get within 30 miles of the airport at certain altitudes. So it's really well orchestrated if Bubba follows the rules. Therein lies the problem, because many times Bubba doesn't fly the rules, and that's the catch. But that's what happened on September the 11th. Ladies and gentlemen, you are on your own. Find your way back to the gate, find your way back to the runway, and God bless you. But Flight United 23 has basically been suppressed for over 20 years. Now, there's a lot of information that has come out about it, in recent weeks and just this last month. And Anthony and I are going to go do a deep dive into that. So come back and join us next week for our deep dive into United 23. We'll tell you all about it. We've got a good program for you the rest of the day today. The broadcast is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company and located in Atlanta, Georgia. They pick up waste vegetable oil, clean grease traps, also sanitize the front of the house and the back of the house in restaurants. If you want clean, reliable service, check out PCRenergy.com on the web. They're right there. They're waiting for your call. They have a live customer service team. They'll answer your calls pretty much any time of the day or night. If they can't get to you in the middle of the night, they'll call you back first thing early the next morning. We do have live attendance at PCRE. They do have live customer service people that are able to provide emergency service. If you're tired of automated attendance, slow, unreliable, and dirty service, maybe it's time for you to check out PCRenergy.com. We come to you on the John Fredericks Radio Network up and down the East Coast. We also come to you on CDM.press and their 13 digital platforms, as well as simulcasting on their live streams on Getter, Rumble, X, and other outlets, I am sure. We're also on those outlets, as well as Facebook and YouTube Live. So you can come and join us on the live stream right now. We have several thousand people interacting with us on Getter. We'd love to have you. And if you're on Getter, I'd love for you to do just one teensy little favor for me. If you enjoy the program, if you like listening, I wish you would look for John Gordon Truth on Getter and just hit that little subscribe button. We're at like 50 followers on Getter, not very many, even though we got over 6,000 listeners every Saturday on Getter on John Fredericks' page. We'd like you to come over and subscribe on our page so we can continue to bring you content throughout the week. And we won't pester you. We won't cover you up with advertisements or solicitations. We'd just like you to show us that you listen to us by subscribing to our channel, just like we'd like you to follow us on X, YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. I think I've covered it. Now let's get to our guest. We've got Scott Walker. He is with Arabella Advisor. Well, he's going to talk about Arabella Advisors, which is the subject of his new book, and just the extent that these NGOs have grown and gotten so much power and money, and they have become the dark money network for leftist billionaires, secretly working to transform America. And then we've got Dr. Gilda Carle. She is a very interesting, extremely intelligent lady, and she's going to talk about woke feminism, the death of masculinity, poor silenced men. Anthony, do you know any of those? And then her book, her new book, she's going to be talking about why real men don't go woke. So stay tuned. Let's get to our first guest now. You're on The Truth with John Gordon. Stacey Abrams collected a small payday, $2 billion for her NGO. Evidently, I chose the wrong career. But here to help us sort it all out is Scott Walker. He is president of Capital Research Center. He's a graduate of Georgetown and the author of Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. That's a mouthful, Scott. Can you help us unravel and tell us about these NGOs? My suspicions are awakened.
Sure. We can get to Arabella in a second. I'll do the more generic NGO, which, by the way, is just Washington speak for nonprofit, right? I know normal Americans don't use these kind of buzzwords. It just means nonprofit. Although, as I've testified repeatedly to Congress, the NGO that stands for non-governmental association, most of them ought to be called BGOs because they're basically governmental organizations. That is to say,
governmental organizations that are off the books, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Over
Yeah.
35,000 nonprofits, NGOs, get most of their money from government. So in my book, that makes them basically governmental organizations. And you're right, the government loves to shove stuff out to them. The Stacey Abrams billions that you just mentioned, that was part of a $27 billion slush fund called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which then
Yeah.
parceled money out to still more groups and on and on.
I think she's got a total of $90,000 worth of toaster ovens that she claims to have given away to show for it. Not a very impactful $2 billion expenditure, in my view.
So this is you also have this in the immigration industrial complex. Tons of nonprofits were getting federal dollars, supposedly to help immigrants, but actually, of course, they were incentivizing immigrants all over Latin America to come here illegally. And then once they're here, they also get more money for them when they're here, but they were getting money for them elsewhere to encourage them to come here. And immigration, I've got nothing against in principle, but legal immigration is the way it's supposed to work.
So, who invented this concept of NGOs? I mean, I frankly I was not aware of the term until fairly recently, within like the last year or two, I think. And I heard NGOs bannered about, and I had no real concept what they were talking to. And then one day I woke up and I suddenly became attuned to it and enlightened to it. It sure sounds sketchy as you can get. Who invented it, the NGO, and when did it come into being? Probably a long time ago.
I'm pretty sure the term NGO, which, as you said, normal Americans say nonprofits or charities or something like that. They don't say NGOs.
Those I'm aware of.
And NGO, I think, came out of the International Parasite class, right? The UN and that kind of things use that kind of language. But the principle that you're worried about is, right, that's about as old as government itself, because the more standard term for that is cronyism, right? Yeah, you got some government monies, and some of those monies are going to get spread around to your friends, and then maybe your friends are spreading around to even more friends. And that's where it becomes problematic. Now, it's not crazy for a government entity to say, you know what, we're government, so we're not good at helping people get off drugs. So it's not in principle crazy to say, there are religious groups that have really effective programs to get people off drugs. So instead of having government bureaucrats do that, maybe we should, have grants or contracts with nonprofits that can do that. And that's, again, in theory, that's not crazy. But the problem is everything with government is easily corrupted into cronyism. And that's exactly what you have with the Stacey Abrams getting a chunk of that even bigger slush fund. And there are other things, too. Like there's a thing called the Solidarity Center, which gets almost 100% of its money from the federal tax dollars. But it's really just a subsidiary of the AFL-CIO, which, golly gee, gives almost all of its political donations to one political party. So, surprise, when that political party had the White House the last 4 years, it hired some people from the Solidarity Center. And then, gosh, tens of millions of dollars started flowing to the Solidarity Center, supposedly for good works abroad, but obviously really to help out the AFL-CIO empire.
And whose administration did that originate under?
Well, they had gotten some monies in prior Democrat administrations, but in the Biden administration, it became tens of millions of dollars from there. As I say, after 3 of the employees of the group were hired, and I have to say I can't remember off the top of my head where those 3 employees now are, but I bet you at least some of them have gone back to the Solidarity Center as employees there. So, I mean, because again, that's in Washington, we talk about this revolving door, right? Groups, outside groups finagle with friends inside an administration, and then they go work in the administration, and then they go back to the other thing. By the way, environmentalism is especially a bad example of this. EPA administrators have done this. High level, that's Environmental Protection Agency, right? One of the top federal agencies. You see a lot of revolving door there. And, that obviously is, that's cronyism. So.
Well, it sounds almost like an attempt to, you couldn't call it legitimize cronyism, but certainly cover it up and cloak it with some sort of, cloak it with legitimacy. How about that?
Well, exactly. Plus, remember, the more you complicate the money flow, the harder it is for anybody to know where the money ends up. And even if a group like Capital Research Center, where I work, even if we uncover that trail, when I start trying to explain it, again, normal Americans, your eyes are going to glaze over because there's group upon group and this upon that and agency upon agency, right? And again, they love that. That's a smoke, as you say, that is a camouflage, that's a smokescreen. Because again, that money, the $2 billion that the Stacey Abrams nonprofit got, by the way, when that nonprofit had $100 in its bank account, right? So nice, as you say, nice work if you can get it.
How can they get away with it? I mean, where's the accountability? And, when you talk about, not you, but when the current topic of the day is unrelentingly focused on Epstein, I don't think it's about Epstein. I think it's about accountability in government, because I think most people believe that Epstein was doing the work of either the CIA or Mossad or both. We don't have proof of that, but we have more than a lot of smoke to support it, like the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, who in a Senate confirmation hearing said that he was told to lay off Epstein because he was intel. I mean, I think that's pretty good indication that there's something there. So where is the accountability? I mean, $2 billion just poof. And because it's Stacey Abrams, you can't touch her. Is that the deal?
Well, I totally think that Americans need to be pounding the drum on these things, all the time. But I will tell you two somewhat hopeful things. One is that, again, that was EPA, Environmental Protection Agency money. And Lee Zeldin is now head of the EPA. And he is working very hard. I know this for a fact. He is working very hard to try to claw back some of these outrageous Enviro slush fund monies. So that's hopeful. The other thing is, I've testified 3 times in the last 6 weeks to Congress on dirty NGO stuff. And the most recent one was in the House Judiciary Oversight Subcommittee, right? Now, and the whole hearing was about how the left funds its nonprofit infrastructure through federal dollars. And it was an excellent hearing. I talked about exactly these things. And guess what? This was the tiniest subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, right? So shouldn't be that big a deal. But you know who was there? Not just the ranking member, so top Democrat of the subcommittee, but the ranking member of the entire committee, Jamie Raskin, a powerful and important guy. Now,
what a delightful individual.
Oh, yeah, and a charming man too. Yes, absolutely.
Totally.
Now, the thing is, he was there every single second of that hearing, and he was saying, this hearing is a waste of time. This is a nothing burger. There's nothing to see here. And the answer, of course, but his presence belied every word coming out of his mouth. If it was a nothing burger, he would never have sat there every single second. In fact, his presence proved that the hearing's thesis is right. The left is desperate for your federal tax dollar.
Can we doge these NGOs?
Well, that's the thing. I know that EPA Doge people are working on this, the Stacey Abrams mess and all the rest of it. And I know Lee Zeldin is determined to claw back as much money as possible, and certainly to stop these spigots of tax dollars going into the left-wing infrastructure. By the way, my nonprofit has never taken a penny in 4 decades of existence, never taken a penny from any government.
Good for you. I'm beginning to like you more and more. Keep it up. Keep fighting. Now, Dan Bongino last Saturday, a week ago, said that the things that he has learned since becoming assistant director of the FBI shocked him to his core and have changed him forever. Where do you think he's going with that?
Well, as you say, you can't do this kind of corrupt cronyism without camouflage and smokescreen. You have to defend the cronyism in various ways and hide it. And sadly, huge chunks of the federal government hide cronyism and corruption. Now, even though, of course, they're supposed to be weeding, like the FBI are supposed to be one of the top people weeding this stuff out, but they don't. By the way, there's 73 inspectors general in the federal government. They're supposed to be, they were supposed to be Doge before Doge. And to be fair, some of them have done good work, but a lot of them too either were appointed because they weren't going to do the work or got corrupted and softened up after they got the job.
Who is the puppet master?
Well, I don't think there's one. I think there's lots, right? There's
somebody's going to. But in every organization I've worked for, there has been a training program. I mean, when you come into a job that you've never done before, you really don't know how to perform the job. So corporations and institutions have massive training programs. Somebody, I'm speculating, has to train these people on how to cover this stuff up and how to behave once they get into positions of authority in government. I'm wildly imaginative, but you have heard for years about these organizations that sort of superimpose their dogma on government, going back to the Trilateral Commission, and then there's the council that supposedly Bill Barr is a member of. I mean, who imposes their will on the American system of government so that we cannot see behind the curtain and we cannot seem to get accountability, even though we feel like most of it is in the public domain already? I mean, as listeners to our program know, it is my considered opinion that the federal government, the CIA, Allen Dulles, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the then Vice President of the United States, assisted by J. Edgar Hoover, killed and covered up the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I think that that's a conclusion that any honest, intelligent person would conclude if they took the time to dig into it. And you don't have to dig really far below the surface to reach those conclusions. I can give you about 3 books that will get you there in a hurry, including The Devil's Triangle, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ by Roger Stone, and The Unspeakable by Douglas. I mean, read those 3 books, and if you walk away from there thinking Oswald had anything to do with Kennedy's assassination, then I've got some property just to the west of me I'd like to show you and talk to you about. But I mean, I just don't understand why, when the evidence is right here in front of us, we can continue to be led down the primrose path that there's nothing to see here. And it's the same, MO every time, i.e. Epstein file.
On the one hand, I certainly think that there are, the evil genius, as it were, who is genuinely strategizing and plotting out ways to hide the corruption, to hide dirtiness and the rest. But it's also true that at this point, we have a huge class of people, right? All of whose interest it is to be operating in this way. And, it's true people will think through dirty plots, but it's also true that people will just slide into confirmation bias and blah, blah. Like, I'll give you a great example, right? So the Russian hoax was horrific and an absolute outrage. And by the way, our website, influencewatch.org, has fabulous documentation of huge amounts of the awfulness of the Russia hoax claiming Trump colluded with Russia. At the same time, when you read some of the texts of Stroke and Page and this, that, and the other, I actually can't keep from thinking that there were times that even people who had to be able to recognize, hey, we're lying about some of this, we're cheating on some of this, that they still half believe, that they were half believing this. Because again, human confirmation bias is just so strong. You believe what you want to believe, and you want to believe the things that keep you safe and keep your friends safe and keep this whole corrupt system operating, right?
So who are the people that have this confirmation bias that you're speaking of? I'm not.
Well, as I said, at this point,
I'm
right?
Following you, but I'm not exactly.
There's a whole class in Washington that has been corrupted by the power and the money. And so they don't want to rock the boat. One of the best examples, a simple little tiny example, Senator John Kennedy, one of my heroes, as they were trying to get, one of these, I can't even remember now if it was the rescission bill or the big beautiful bill, but I think it was big beautiful, but whatever. It was one of the two last big bills. And he goes on TV and he says, I am so sick of seeing Republicans do things like this. I'm not going to give you the name, but I can tell you there was a senator who demanded $700 million for a pet project, or we couldn't have his vote for the bill. And I'm so sick of that. Well, that's how the incentive structure works, right? That senator had been doing that kind of crap the whole parties, and yet things don't change that much, right? Because the incentive structure is bad. This is the way it's always been done. It's confusing. Again, the average human being with a real life and a family and a business, right? They can't spend all their lives making sense of this stuff because, as you say, it's complicated. There's smoke screens, there's camouflage. So, it is so easy to be the FBI guy who looks the other way, to be the senator who says, look, I'll vote for the bill, but you got to give me this 700 mil for my district, whatever.
Well, to your point, I read recently that Andrew Clyde, congressman from Georgia, voted for the big, beautiful bill at the end of the process. And in exchange for his vote, he got an exemption for some sort of gun silencers. And he is in the business of selling guns. He has sporting goods and gun stores in Georgia. That was personally repugnant to me. I don't like it. But I guess that's just the way the ball bounces, and I better get my big boy pants on and just get used to it.
Well, I do have one thing to say, which is this is why I regularly say there is only one kind of reform right now. People talk about all kinds of these, like, we're going to have donor disclosure. We're going to do this, that, or the other. This little kind of process adjustment is going to fix things. And it never does, because the only real reform is less government. The biggest problem we have is not that people are doing these bad things. The biggest problem we have is by having a morbidly obese federal government, the incentives become massive to do these things. And the complexity becomes such that it's hard to track these things, even for somebody like me whose whole job is to track them, much less a normal American mom or dad.
Okay, so I want to get to your job, and one last question before we move on. I want to talk about the Capital Research Center. I want to talk about the book. One of my disappointments is, as much as I loved Ronald Reagan, he talked about getting the government off the backs of the American people, less government, less spending. Yet he expanded the federal budget more than any president prior to his time. Now, we think it was for good cause. He used military spending basically to bankrupt the Soviet Union and cause it to splinter into pieces. So in hindsight, you'd have to say, well, that was worth the price. Then Donald Trump comes into office. He makes similar pledges, and he passes one of the largest budgets ever passed in Washington, along with a lot of tax cuts, which make it palatable to people, I guess. But we're talking about perhaps $4 trillion in deficit spending over the next 10 years when we've already got $36 trillion in government spending right now. And at some point, it seems to me that it's going to be unsustainable, and that the bubble will burst, and it's going to be a sad day in the world, not just America. It's like a train coming down the track, and we see the light, but we're not willing to move out of the way. Do you share my frustration and concern?
You're totally right. And this is so I just complained that the only way to make things better, not fix everything, but make them better, is to have a lot less government. You just replied, we keep getting more and more and more government. And you're right, that isn't sustainable in the long run. But now we've got to the deepest problem of all, which is you and me and the rest of America, right? As a not very admirable politician years ago had a great line: we need to expect less of the government and more of ourselves, right? Their only way to have less government is for Americans to be willing to have that adjustment. We have to be demanding less government, and we have to support politicians when they genuinely try to cut it. And the reason that the Reagans and the Trumps and the rest don't cut it is because there's not really support in America for doing it. There's not majority support in America to cut government.
I mean, my paradigm is that there's about half of America wants less government, but the other half is like, gimme, 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 bring it on. And I think that's the division that we've got.
On the one hand, since nobody's ever tried, right, in your and my lifetime, nobody's tried it. It's hard to say. But I do, I'm old enough to remember Reagan. And so what I remember is he did what in Washington is called a cut, namely slightly decrease the rate of increase, right? Slightly decreasing the huge upward curve of growth of government was considered a horrible cut because you should assume it's always going to keep increasing. And that was an outrage, and there were protests and all the rest.
Well, I mean, that's right out of Rand Paul's playbook. He said, look, if you want to curb the federal government spending, all you have to do is just as simple. Take 1 penny out of every dollar each year for the next 10 years and reduce government by that amount. You get a balanced budget, you get responsible spending, and the deficits go away. Now, that seems to make so much common sense to me that it seems like Americans could join hands and support that concept. But to your point, it doesn't happen. So maybe it's just not going to. It rather than a group of people controlling the wheels and just making these decisions, what you're really describing, I think, is a cultural thing. It's just part of the Washington swamp that most Americans say they despise. But then on the other hand, there's a real conundrum because you're explaining that the will to change is not shared by the American people. So we're screwed.
Yeah. Well, as you say, something at some point the tug comes. The only thing we can be happy about in America is we're less screwed up than, say, Europe. The rest of the developed world is more screwed up.
Yeah, but how did they get in that condition?
Oh, well, the same kind of thing.
Through socialism and transfer payments.
Yeah.
And we can see it. They've given us a perfect model. And instead of changing it, we're just hopping on board, it seems to me. So, well, before we run out of time, tell us about Capital Research Center and who founded it and what is the mission and purpose. And you are the CEO. What is your role there? And what path are you charting?
Sure. It was started around 35 years ago by Willa Johnson, and she was a hero of the Reagan Revolution. She helped. One of her things she was best known for is she helped get conservatives into the Reagan administration, because that's another big problem. That it's most of the government's not remotely conservative, overwhelmingly, and it's hard to get smart, strong, tough conservatives into the government. So she was doing that. But then she starts this, and it was always designed, essentially, I guess the simplest way to put it would be to watch out for special interests, and especially to watch out in the philanthropic world, because it has been a terrible problem that American businessmen, they are phenomenally successful. They provide they become rich because they provide stuff people really want. Like Ford, for instance, was great at providing inexpensive cars to people who otherwise wouldn't have them. That's an awesome thing, obviously, for America, and he made a fortune. But then the fortune went into the Ford Foundation, and the left captured it. The left captured so many of the all of the big original foundations built up by great American businessmen. So that was one of the things that they wanted to watch. They also wanted to watch, obviously, where those corrupt foundations were giving their money, because for many decades, those lefty foundations gave money to lefty, nonprofits, charities, who then did all kinds of bad stuff. So that's sort of our great specialty. We do more than that. We also do unions. We do your political mega donors, but we are tracing the left and its money is the way to look at it and understanding it. So as I said, influencewatch.org is a Wikipedia of the left. If people want to understand better, what is this Green New Deal and who's putting money into that? And what about this Stacey Abrams nonprofit? And it's on and on. What about this union that's destroying the Chicago teachers unions destroy the lives of poor Black Chicago kids year after year after year. You want to know more about them? Go to influencewatch.org. So that's the kind of thing that we do. And the most recent thing we've done is the book. that you're kindly letting me talk about, the Arabella Advisors book. Arabella is the largest dark money network on either side, left or right. And the book explains how it operates, the billionaires who give it money, and so on.
So who comprises the Arabella organization? What is it?
Sure. The 30 seconds answer there would be, think of a pyramid. At the top, you have Arabella Advisors, a for-profit consulting firm, Beltway Bandit, we'd say in D.C. It creates and operates everything below it in the pyramid. The middle level of the pyramid are half dozen nonprofits of different legal types, charities and political nonprofits. That's where the money comes in. If you're Zuckerberg, Gates, Soros, or a bunch of these, Ford Foundation, et cetera, those lefty billionaires put the money into the nonprofits. And then at the base of the pyramid, you have what you and your listeners see. Hundreds and hundreds of little fake groups like Floridians for a Fair Shake, Secure Michigan Elections, Keep Iowans Healthy. And they want you to think it's your neighbors upset about something when in fact it's some goofball in a DC office creating a website and buying some Facebook ads using money from those billionaires.
Do we know what the budget of the Arabella?
Oh, yeah. The short
is?
answer is it's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. In the 2022 election cycle, so 21 and 22, the nonprofits alone, we don't know about the for-profit, but the nonprofits took in $3 billion. That's more than the Democrat National Committee, Republican National Committee, and both parties' Senate and House committees by $500 million.
So when we see these riots just spring up across the country and, protest at Tesla stores and people keying Teslas, but then they come out with signs that say President Musk, but they look like they've been pre-printed, and the sign looks the same in Portland as it does in Dallas, as it does in Atlanta, as it does in Washington. Is that the Arabella group?
Well, the best way to think of it is Arabella and the other, because sadly there are more networks like that. There's the Tides Network, there's the Open Society Network, and on and on. So the left's nonprofits, including those billionaire donors, do orchestrate these protests. They want you to think, oh, everybody in Portland just got upset. No, a handful of very sophisticated organizers turned out a crowd in Portland, and the same network turned it out in Nashville and Memphis and Milwaukee and Detroit and on and on.
You've given us a lot to think about. That's some pretty heavy stuff. So, Scott, you worked in the Bush administration, George W. Bush. Now, you've talked a lot about conservatism, yet there are many people within the Republican Party that think the Bush administration was really pretty moderate and may even have labeled them rhinos. What was your experience when working in the domestic policy office of the Bush administration?
Well, I was in the second term, but only for a year and a half. And my sense is that the second term was probably more conservative as far as the staffing and what they were trying to do than the first term. And I, on the one hand, everybody I knew was always trying to keep from having explosions of government spending. On the other hand, Bush never vetoed a bill until well into his second term. So, I think their hearts were in the right place, but they weren't, necessarily fierce fighters. Now, how much appetite there was in the country for fierce fighting is unclear too. But, it is an absolute fact that both Trump administrations, especially the second one, are fighting much harder for conservative principles than the George W. Bush or any of the other Republicans before.
President Trump refers to, no offense intended by me, but he refers to the people that worked in George W.'s administration as Bushies. And we're thinking that there's not much love lost between George W. and Donald Trump, as evidenced by George W.'s entrance into Jimmy Carter's funeral just a few months ago. There was no eye contact. There was no recognition. I mean, I don't know what Melania did to George W., but he wouldn't even acknowledge her presence, although he walked right in front of both of them, was happy to see Obama. And then we saw President Trump and Obama having a jolly old time on the row behind them. What do you think those dynamics tell us?
Uh, well, I'm completely guessing, but I would say, George W. Bush liked to present himself as a good old boy Texan, but he was old money wasp is what he really was. And I totally understand an old money wasp is very fussy about politeness. And, nobody ever accused Donald Trump of being polite. So I think to some degree it's just a natural disinclination to like somebody like Trump. But I also think that it's envy that Trump has been more successful at accomplishing many things than George W. was, sadly.
I think that's a good analysis. I like that. Now, George W., I've known some people that worked in his administration, and kind of my litmus test has become, what do you think of J6?
Well, on the one hand, to the extent that laws were broken on January 6th, I'm for the rule of law. On the other hand, the lefties wildly blew it out of proportion. I mean, it was not there were things that were not wonderful. There were violations of law, but that doesn't mean, Nancy Pelosi put fences up for months. The DOJ virtually stopped every other operation in order to go after thousands and thousands of people, including ones who didn't break laws. I mean, it was a wild overreaction. Even though I certainly would not endorse everything that was done on January 6th. And the January 6th committee, by the way, that was especially repulsive, to refuse to seat members of the other party on the committee is absolutely outrageous.
Well, they cherry
and a
picked information and
violation of norms.
You talk about law breaking. If you want to cite some law breaking, I would highlight the murder of Ashley Babbitt and the beating to death of the lady that was in the tunnel. I mean, I've watched a fair amount of the January 6th day. I agree with you. There is no excuse for lawlessness in our country, but on either side of the coin. And I've watched the Epoch Times documentary on January the 6th. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not, but the crowd was, according to that documentary, and it has the ring of truth to me, largely provoked. It was a peaceful demonstration until the cops started firing pellets and smoke into the crowd. And then it became, rose to the level of a riot. So it was a low day in our nation's history. We're beyond it now, but I still would like truth and I would like justice for the things that happened on that day. It seems that the justice has been one direction only. Bongino, again, promises us we're going to find out who planted those pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC. I'm waiting with bated breath.
Well, you're right. That's one of the mysteries. The other thing I haven't seen the Epoch Times documentary, although I'm a big fan of Epoch Times work. So I'm not knowledgeable to give huge things, but I will say one thing because it matters a lot. We track all the bad protests, right? Like the ICE attacks and things like that. And it is worth another outrage of January 6th by the other side is it is outrageous that Nancy Pelosi refused to allow National Guard to be around because, again, that might have prevented anything violent from happening. And she absolutely refused, and that is completely in the same vein as the mayors and governors of blue states and cities who handcuff their own police forces to keep them from keeping riots from breaking out in our cities. And they've done it, they do it whether it's UC Berkeley and the students protesting a conservative speaker, or whether it's, the George Floyd protests, or whether it's the ICE protests. They will not keep up the rule of law by having sufficient law enforcement to prevent violence. And that's absolutely happened on January 6th. And Nancy Pelosi deserves grievous criticism and accountability for that.
I agree with you. Who did Bob Menendez piss off? I mean, do you think that he's the only person in the Congress that is on the take? I mean, he has some gold bars and a Mercedes. I certainly don't condone any of it. And I'm glad that we got accountability. But it seems that he was made an example of for reasons that I don't understand. And I look, if a jury of his peers convicted him. Sorry. He got what he deserved. But are there others that should be treated similarly, do you think?
Well, Peter Schweitzer is a friend, and he has done wonderful work on showing that there are lots and lots of highly suspicious uh, uh, increases of wealth by our members of Congress. And it may, in poor Menendez, it may just be that he was one of the most egregious and goofy of them. Probably the others are a little more sophisticated.
Well, Peter Schweizer's been on our show, and I've read his books. I am a huge fan, and I think he's very courageous. I hope he's safe from the deep state, but he goes. He doesn't hold back, and I really admire him for the work that he has done. Well, Scott Walker, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You really have won me over as a former member of the Bush administration. I was a little skeptical, I'll have to be honest with you, when we set this interview, but you appear to me to be very real and very candid and open, and I appreciate that. President of Capital Research Center and author of the book, Arabella, The Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. Where do we find that book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any place you buy books.
And you'd like us to go to influencewatch.org. Are there any other places that we can track and follow you and keep up
with you? Sure. Our main site is capitalresearch.org, and you can sign up for a letter. It is simply, here's the highlights of my whole team's terrific research for the last 2 weeks.
Well, keep up the good work, and thank you for what you're doing. I hope you'll come back on our show again soon.
Love to be with you. Thanks.
You're going to want to stay tuned for our next guest. She has written more books than I've been able to read. Real Men Don't Go Woke. I'm really interested to get into that one. Don't Bet on the Prince. I like this next one. Don't lie on your back for a guy who doesn't have yours. How to win when the mate cheats. Oh, I think Kristen Cabot and Andy Byron may want to reach out to you. One up strategies business schools don't teach. Amplify your media presence, amplify your brand. We're going to spend a lot of time on that one, I hope. And Dr. Gilda is a psychologist and also teaches at the Arizona Global Campus in the MBA program. Whew, Dr. Gilda Carle, that's a lot.
I'm a little busy.
I'll say. So where should we get into this? You work with corporations and help executives build relationships, is what I'm understanding.
Relationships affect the bottom line. So they have to be buzzing perfectly for everything to work perfectly.
So tell us what that means. Let's break it down. What things do you help them improve on and in their pursuit of perfection?
Whenever there is a problem with the bottom line of any kind, it's always because there's an interpersonal relationship problem. And so I delve into what that is, how that manifested itself, and how it is playing out in the corporation. And this is what a performance coach does. Do you remember the series that was called Billions? And the performance coach went in and dealt with all these money maniacs who were making a fortune but couldn't figure out their lives. And they were on drugs and they were doing dysfunctional things and whatnot. Well, she shook up the whole tree and the coconuts started to fall and they started lining up and doing what they needed to do. And that's what I do. That's what I have done. I've been on Wall Street, Main Street. I've been all around the block. So I've done that a lot. And it all boils down to how people feel about themselves. So when we get into this, if somebody is not walking into a position, if they're, for example, president of a company, if they're not saying, I am John Gordon with a capital I, what are we going to do? those people who are not walking around with a capital I are then lowercase i's. And who do we attract? We attract not who we want, but who we are. So lowercase i's attract lowercase i's. And this is what we're seeing, unfortunately, among the people interacting today, men and women, and what's happening to mankind in general. And so I had no choice in working with so many women when I spoke to them and said, uh, something's got to give here with your relationships with your men. They had no answers because the men had become crushed and made almost infantile by the women. So I said, I've got to do something. And that's why I did this book, Real Men Don't Go Woke. Because what has happened today to our men has been it's impossible to deal with. Women don't understand it. And men are finding more and more that women are putting them down, not giving them a voice, as though men needed permission to get a voice. And that's where our men are right now. They feel that if they step out this way, they're in trouble. If they step out that way, they're in trouble. They don't want to speak. And men's silence has become a very major problem in our communities today. They're not speaking. They're not speaking about any of the negativity that's going on in their lives. They're not speaking about the way they have been treated, the way they have been canceled, the way they have been castrated by anything they try to say and do. And so when I wrote this book, I was getting thank yous from men who were saying, wow, I'm so glad you're speaking out because I am unable to. One guy, a PhD, was fired when he spoke out and the company didn't like what he had to say. We can't continue doing that to our men. And as a result of men being silenced and holding things in, we're finding that the suicide rate of men is 4 times greater than that of women.
No kidding. I did not know that. That is quite a statistic.
It is horrifying.
So you raise so many ideas or thoughts that I've rushed through my mind while you've been speaking. Do you think that it is reasonable to put feminism on one end of a continuum and masculinity on another? Are there not many iterations in between?
They're definitely, I'm glad you raised that question, John, because there are definitely differentiations along the spectrum. We are finding that the violent female, the females who are unable to allow men to have their freedoms are not the kinds of females that I hang out with, that I even know. These are different men, these are different women. Let me give you an example. On Instagram, there was a post by a woman who was talking about the male suicide rate that has been skyrocketing to the point that even President Trump talked about what is happening with our males killing themselves. And one woman said male suicides, and another person said, it's not high. The rates are not high enough. And
What?
on Instagram, the rates are not high enough. And almost 7,000 women agreed with that.
Well, I can't get my hands around that statement. What I mean, what kind of demonic callousness is she exhibiting, and why?
That's exactly right. And
maybe she's just looking for clickbait.
Well, 7,000. Well, you know what? On Instagram and on TikTok and a lot of social media, I spend a lot of time on these. And I look at the comments. I actually read the comments. Some of my colleagues say, don't bother reading the comments. They're so awful. I said, no. I want to know. It's man in the street. I want to know what they're feeling.
Well, I want to know if man in the street, if that reflects a level of psychosis that we are seeing in our country today.
Yeah, well, I would say psychosis, because the men have now wised up. And many men are saying, in the comments that I'm getting, many men are saying that I'm not going out with women. I'm not going to associate with women. I am divorced. I never want to see another woman again. And it goes on and on and on. And I had one woman commenting, why are men not approaching us? Well, if they're going to be crushed and castrated and canceled, what crazy man is going to step in and say, okay, fine. Okay, I'll approach you even though you're going to destroy me? What nonsense is that? It won't happen.
I think that would require someone who is a masochist.
Well, exactly.
Those people.
So the men are turning off. And that's, you know what? There are a lot of women out there who are not part of this other group of women. And that's the spectrum that you're talking about. And we cannot continue this kind of rhetoric as we're raising young boys. I did a book signing for Real Men Don't Go Woke. And, book signings have maybe 10, 20 people showing up. This place was mobbed. And I was talking about and we had men and women. And I was talking about the high rate of suicide of men today. And some of the people in the audience said, what? Really? And then I spoke about how it's also affecting our boys and how boys are now committing suicide, starting at 10 years old. Well, we went home. That was the end of the book signing. All my books were sold out. That was the end. Next day, I got a phone call from one of the people who was attending, and she was in tears, and she said, my best friend's son, 13, had just committed suicide while I was talking about this. How? What does a 13-year-old boy have to kill himself over? Now we know about bullying and how inadequate the schools are in handling bullying, but that's not all of it. They are fed all these negative messages that you're not okay, and you're a lowercase I, you're less than. And 13-year-old boy commits suicide in my own backyard. This is Scottsdale, Arizona. Nice area with everything to live for.
Well, do you think that the people that predominantly are committing suicide are suffering from a mental illness? Is it possible that depression is the number one cause of suicide in these people?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when President Trump was talking about the suicide level, he also talked about all the statistics, interestingly enough, that I had in the book. Like depression is skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. Loneliness is skyrocketing. In a couple of countries, Japan, the UK, they have ministers of depression, ministers of loneliness. Go figure that one out. But people are feeling isolated. They're feeling alone. They're feeling as though they have no voice. And I'm starting the ball to roll. And men are thanking me. Mothers are thanking me for their sons. They're very worried about what's going to happen with their sons. As soon as a girl says, well, he came on to me. Well, I mean, that's cause for what? Incarceration? Or getting him into the school's principal? Or what?
That who came on to her?
The boy, that the boy in her class came on to her. And
well, I mean, so I help me out here, because this has been something that I don't know. First of all, I don't know what that means. when the boy comes on to her? I mean, is
Well,
is flirtation coming on to them? Is saying, "Hey, I'd like to have a Coca-Cola with you at recess." Is that coming on to them? I mean, frankly, if a girl were to come on to me, I would be supremely flattered. I mean, what am I missing here?
Exactly. That was the olden days. Yes. And the
Oh, that
women
explains it. Thank you very much for that dose of realism. Well, we'll bring me into the modern day culture. What is
John, I'm with
what
you.
are the social norms?
We're probably contemporary, so I'm with you. And the women are all complaining that the guys aren't approaching them when every time the guy flirts or tries to say something that may be a little off color, well, the woman is automatically believed because that's all.
They're rebuked or taken to the principal's office.
Yeah,
Yet they're
right.
disappointed that guys aren't flirting with them or conversating with them.
So, in other
Whatever you like.
words, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Exactly. And so it's easier just to not. Just don't. You know.
And the translation for easier to not is okay, I'm not doing anything. The not means I am not dating. I am not going. This was amazing that I posted the information about the woman who said they're not high enough, and all the almost 7,000 women who liked that topic. And I posted that on TikTok. I can't hear you. Have I
No,
lost
I'm
you?
just trying to calm the dogs down in the next room. Don't mind me.
Okay. So I posted that on TikTok, and the people that came to my site, this thing went viral. I have almost 50,000 viewers and likes for my post when I reported this. And that's where I'm getting all these comments from mostly men saying, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm done. And they're talking about the false allegations that we know so well about, the false allegations that land men into sometimes incarceration. I mean, my book uses real life names, not the Congress people who most of our young people don't know the names of, but I use real names in the media, public names like Will Smith. He held in all this negative information about who he was and how he was feeling. And then we saw what happened. Like a warm bottle of champagne, the cork popped and he went insane. And he slapped Chris Rock out of pure emotion that had been held in. And I am telling men, do not allow yourself to be silenced. You're silencing yourself, which means that you're going to act your anger in. You're going to find out that people are willing to help you if you talk.
So that does raise a question in my mind. And you're right. I mean, men are guilty if accused. It's just that simple.
Period.
And I don't know what you thought of the incident that occurred to the late Kobe Bryant, but he was at a ski resort adjacent to Vail. He had dinner at the resort. He met a young lady there and invited her back to his room. And then the next day she cried foul and claimed that she had been raped.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, I don't think that accepting an invitation back to someone's room justifies rape, but under any circumstances. On the other hand, we don't know the circumstances, and personally, I was not willing to just take the allegation as truth. A piece of me says, well, what did she think that was going to happen at 11:30 at night when she was invited back to the NBA stars' room? Did she think they were going to go back there and play solitaire or watch TV? I mean, come on, get real. But again, that does not excuse rape. But in my mind, I would think that there may have been an element of consent. I don't know that. I wasn't there. But it seems to have at least justified an inquiry. But damned if he wasn't guilty the next day just on the basis of the allegation.
And this is what we had again and again and again. In my book, Real Men Don't Go Woke, I talk about Johnny Depp. Look what happened to his
Yeah.
reputation.
Yeah.
And his actress wife decided he was called one of the richest men, or the richest man in Hollywood during a period of time at his peak. And she figured, oh boy, I'm going to get a windfall out of this. And they found that she had lied, and the jury voted for him. Thank the Lord. And he said, now I have my life back. But how many men, and I raise this question all the time, how many men have the resources that Johnny Depp had to fight these allegations?
Well, I remember when David Letterman was accused of having a relationship with an intern. I don't think that she was an underage intern. I think she was just happened to be an intern. She was of the age of consent. And he went on national television. He said, hey, guilty as charged. She wants to blackmail me. She wants to extort me. I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry it happened. And end of story. I never heard another peep about it.
Isn't that interesting? But these women are blackmailing men, and they're trying to ruin their reputation on social media. And especially if they're well-known women, they need that social media to create more and more buzz for their own persona. So they need that. And many of the celebrities have just paid the money and said, I'm just going to get this person to shut up. But that doesn't always happen.
Well, I know a CEO of a very large company who was alleged to have had an affair with the housekeeper, and it was clear that yes, it probably happened. I don't think he denied it, but he said, "Damned if I'm going to be extorted." But the legal system enabled her to extort, and she ended up getting a big number. But the affair went on for some period of time. Isn't there? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a chauvinistic old white guy, you know? But to me, if I was a housekeeper and he made moves on me and I didn't like it, I would just leave. But this went on for a period of time. Why wouldn't you just leave?
You're talking rational behavior. But if a woman feels that there is some opportunity for her to make bank on
Bingo.
all of these allegations, she's going to go for that. Now, let me point out, this is not all women. Let me point out that I now am single, and what I am finding is such dysfunction among men that you can't imagine. They have been burned. They are so angry. They call all women prostitutes. They say, you want to have some dinner? If a woman says yes, okay, she's just a prostitute. They are so angry, and they don't know where to place their anger because there is no opportunity for them to find any kind of peace. And the legal system is what it is, as you know. And this is why I have become spokesperson for the International Council for Men and Boys, a woman
Good for you.
standing up
I
for
knew
men.
I liked you.
Well, a woman standing up for men because nobody else is doing that. And it's affecting me personally. my daughters, my nieces, my mothers, my all of us. It's affecting those of us who are not in that realm. And we have got to speak out, because otherwise our sons, starting at 10 years old and going further, are going to internalize this, not be able to speak about it, and rot their whole system until they can't take it anymore and commit suicide. That is the most unhealthy thing anybody can do.
You know, a friend of mine one time said that we were just waxing poetically. He said, you know, if I ever had a bad enough day that I would consider taking my own life, I think I would just go to the beach and put my foot in the sand for a couple of days, and I'm pretty sure everything would be all right.
That's a mentally healthy person.
It's a pretty simplistic solution, but you know, I love Annie, get your gun. The sun will come out tomorrow. That has always been my mantra, and I've never had a sustained period of bad days. I mean, I've had some periods that weren't so fun, but generally, you know, you just soldier on, and things are gonna be all right.
Unfortunately, that is not the thought.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't know whether we've all become a nation of drama junkies or what. Oh my God, my life is over. I think I'll just take it. I think I'll kill myself. Come on.
Well, I hate to be I don't intend this to be insensitive towards people that are hurting, but to me, I have thought for a long, long time that suicide is really about the most selfish act that anyone could engage in, because the trail of grief and sadness that it causes loved ones and family members is permanent, and it is unrelenting. Even though I have not personally experienced that in my family, thank God, my greatest fear in life is that a family member would get so desperate that they would take their own life. And in today's society, it is a real concern. But
It
it
is.
is such an act of selfishness.
Well, we don't, the schools theoretically are teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, not doing too good a job on that either. But they're not talking about relationships and respect. I think there ought to be 5 R's actually: reading, writing, arithmetic, relationships, and respect. Because it all starts with respecting yourself and respecting life and respecting God and respecting what, just like the name of your show is, the truth.
No
What
kidding.
is the truth? But these feminists, the radical feminists, who, again, I'm underscoring, I don't know, they are not my friends, I don't hang out with them. They are so angry and so nasty toward men. And these women are proliferating to the point that we are running workshops in International Council for Men and Boys of men, for men, on how to defend themselves in court without a lawyer, to go through a more simplistic way of defending themselves more cheaply, more inexpensively, less taxing on them. And men have survived that and have gone through these programs that have been set up by legitimate lawyers, and have defended themselves. And they're still standing, and they're able to do that. So the court systems have to change.
How about a workshop for women on how not to be mean? I
Well,
was out with my adult son, single, the other night with my wife, and these two very attractive ladies walked by. And my son, he's 6'2", he is fit, he is good looking, and he is an extrovert. And he went over and started talking to them.
oh,
And
a man who does approach women. What do you
he
know?
did approach women. He said one of the girls was pretty cool. The other was just a first class B, and she was the prettier of the two. What's with it? Help me get inside the head of females that are beautiful. A guy comes up and talks to them, and then they just turn around and are outright mean. What is it? Are those women that have game, or is it a defense mechanism? I don't know how to relate to it.
It's got to be a defense mechanism, because beauty fades, and all you have is what's in your soul after a while. And these women are not mature enough to understand that. Just like some men are in the process of grieving and separating and divorcing, those are men who I tell women to stay away from. Of course, they are in the process, in the ing position. Same thing with these women. They are not maturing yet. They are babies. They are just plastic on the outside without a soul. For them to address somebody who comes up to them in a perfectly, first of all, it's in a restaurant. It's a
Public
perfectly
place.
safe.
It was at
public
at the bar in the restaurant.
Safe public place for her to turn on the guy and for a guy, it takes tremendous gumption for him to say, "Hey, ladies, who are you? What's your name? Let's have a drink. Let's talk." It's tremendously courageous of this guy. And for a woman to turn her back and say, "Please get away from me." What is she after? These are the same women who are coming to me for help. How do I find a man? What am I going to do? Men don't approach me. What can I do to change things? Well, honey, you have to change yourselves. You know, in this book, Real Men Don't Go Woke, I hold women responsible also. Women have got to make it a safer environment for men to be able to converse and communicate their feelings.
While we're in the search for truth, I have to tell you about half of our audience are female, which I appreciate. And we skew about 50-50. And the audience is a little bit older and probably wiser than I am. But let me ask you, are men to blame as well? I mean, you hear that some men are just real pigs. Are they out there? And have some of the bad men given us, the rest of us, a bad name? Is that where some of it comes from? I mean, let's be real.
Yes, yes, yes. I am not saying that it's all men, it's all women, I'm not saying that at all. I am saying that it's all of us. And we've got to be together. We got ourselves together in this boat. And it's not just women. It's not just men. Men have now made the decision to step back, hold their tongues, be silenced, and they go off and do whatever they want. But there's another kind of man, just like there are different kinds of women. The toxic male, the P. Diddy, the Weinstein, the guys who just grab these women and try to get them to do things, push them to do things that they hadn't started out wanting to do.
Even worse than that, spike their drinks. I mean,
Well, that's all in the book. That's right.
I'm thinking those are outliers. I don't think that typifies men. I think that typifies egomaniacs that have lost touch with reality and have listened too much to the publishers and the news media about what phenoms they are. Which does bring up another question I wanted to ask you when you talk about capital I and little I. And this is something that I've wrestled with a fair amount. In my observations, the people that are real capital I's that talk about themselves all the time and about how special they are, they do seem to cultivate a lot of people around them. Whereas, poor little me, I guess I got a fair amount of little I quotient, but I've always internalized it that I want to be humble. I want to be a real person. And
that's not how.
I usually talk more about the other person than I do myself. But when I was younger, I wasn't the guy that was getting the girls.
Well, that's not how I define capital I. Capital I is not an egomaniac. Capital I is a man who knows what he's got and he's proud of what he's got. He's earned what he's got. He didn't come up through DEI. He knows who he is, what he has, and what he can offer anybody. And he's not going to put up with nonsense and games and all of that. That's the capital I am talking about. He's proud to be a CEO or a sanitation worker, whatever he is. He is proud of who he is without apology. But the little I is the guy who's apologizing for everything. And as soon as the woman attacks him, He says, "Oh yeah, yeah, you're right, and puts his head down and bows down to that. And he is the woke guy who women, young women, say that they like. But the truth is, the guys don't like themselves. They don't like what they have been turned into. And so the comments on my social media are all, I've had enough. And these are good guys. And we've got to grab those guys back.
So how do you reconcile, or how do you hit the right measure of being proud of who you are and letting people know it, but not becoming egotistical and retaining your humility?
Well, that's funny you should ask me.
Am I conflating two different theories here, or uh, are they all related? And how do you get there to the right place?
This is all under the banner of performance coaching, media uh, coaching. This is all what I do. I wrote a book called Amplify Your Media Presence, Amplify Your Brand. And this all talks about that. You don't have to brag about who you are. Your presence says it all. And if you feel it, you will show it. And
I like
that's just
that.
what I work with CEOs and I train them. I work with heads of companies, heads of households, heads of countries. I mean, I'm all scattered all over the spectrum to deal with people who need to understand, to project who they are. It's a matter of projection. Words count very little. When you are talking, when you're doing anything, your words only count 7%. Our body language counts 55%, and our vocal intonation counts 38%. That's 93% of how we present ourselves being nonverbal. Therefore, I don't have to tell you, well, I'm a hotshot, I'm fabulous, I'm terrific. People just know it by the way I go in to what I have to go into, my next appointment, my presentation on a stage, or whatever. People know it. And that's what I'm after. And that's what I'm after. I hope Real Men Don't Go Woke becomes a required book to be read by all girls and boys in secondary school, because they have to understand that, first of all, taking your life is not an answer. First of all, communicating is the only answer there is. I take my lead from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and his whole thing is you communicate instead of going to combat. We don't need to go to combat. I'm addressing the women. Ladies, please make it safer so men can feel safe to talk whatever it is their feelings are. Let their feelings come out. Don't cut them off. Don't comment. Don't give your opinion. Just let them talk. And men, gain a spine. Stop listening to the radical left that's screaming and yelling, shut your mouth, you don't know anything, all men are bad. Don't believe it. You have a major role to play. I love sitting at meetings with lots of testosterone around me. I learn from them and then they learn from me. The interchange of information is where we're after, what we're after. And we are not there yet.
So let me ask you: you want us to be the man? I understand. I like it. Is it nature or nurture? Are you born with it, or do you cultivate it?
Oh man, that's been such a big question and problem for people to solve for years. And
Yes.
I'm not going to try to solve that one here right now. But I think it's a combination of the two. If somebody is more introverted, then they may have a harder time in demonstrating their presence. Like recently, I met a guy who was servicing one of my IT issues, and he came to me with a deep beard, And I said, "Why are you hiding?" And he looked at me because I look at him as a prototype of a man who has been squashed so often that he just shut his mouth. And having a beard in front of his mouth is the most convenient way.
Why do these younger guys want to have facial hair? Why does JD Vance? Why does Eric Trump? Why did my why does my son? They all like to wear a beard. My dad would have jumped on me seriously if I had grown a beard. He didn't like beards or tattoos. So there you go. But so
Well,
what is it? It's a generational thing, obviously. What's the impetus?
well, in the past, in all our literature, we've realized that hair is power. So that's just an additional empowerment some people feel along their face. My whole attitude, personally, this is my personal feeling, is that long bushy beards are hiding something. I
Hmm.
prefer to see the man's face and to know how he's interacting with me. But that's me. Some guys look great with beards. I just don't like the long beards that are camouflaging who a man is.
So, in just a couple of minutes that we've got left, I do want to talk about the Kiss Cam. I went to Coldplay last Saturday night in Fort Lauderdale. It was a great concert. I happened to have gone there with my wife of 48 years. But how to win when your mate cheats? What are you getting at there? And is there any hope for either of these two people, the woman, Kristen Cavett, or the guy, Andy Byron, who just absolutely incredulously to me threatened to sue Coldplay
Yeah.
as if they were the problem. He's the one that went there cheating on his wife, and he wants to blame Coldplay for putting him on the kiss cam. I mean, give
You,
me a break.
you
What
said
is
it
the matter with
all.
people?
Yes, and they're both resigned now from Astronomer. They've left
Yeah.
the company, and
What
to
about their
sue.
marriages? Can a marriage survive that kind of absolute embarrassment?
I've counseled people who have had cheating in their marriages, and they have survived. The marriage has survived, and but it takes so much work. And how do you get over that vision of your mate having sexual relations with another person? I mean, that's what I find most people tell me, that I can't get over that vision. However, marriages can survive with that. Yet, why would you want your marriage to survive if your partner is a serial cheater and has proven himself or herself to be a serial cheater? Just the mere fact that Andy Byron has intended, and I don't know if it's media hype or whatever, but he said, or somebody from his team said, we are going to sue Coldplay. Coldplay was doing its thing. They had this kiss cam. I mean, I would do this if I'm up on a stage. You're kidding with the people. You're getting them involved. You're engaging with them.
Well, it's ubiquitous. It's sporting events and concerts, and it's a fun thing that we find in our culture. And to run the risk of spoiling the fun for everybody just because you happen to have gotten caught in a compromising position is kind of talk about selfishness. There you go again.
That's right. You're absolutely right. This is a perfect example of a man who is not taking responsibility, a man who is so egocentric and narcissistic that what he says goes. And I understand from some of the other people who work for him said he was egocentric and narcissistic. And so it's just carrying itself out.
I heard a rumor, and I don't believe it is true. The rumor that is circulating is that Andy Byron's wife knew that he was cheating, knew that he was taking his girlfriend to the Coldplay concert, knew somebody that worked in the production company, and said, "Hey, why don't you put this adorable couple on camera?" Now, you talk about how to win when your mate cheats. If that rumor had any a scintilla of truth to it, that would be revenge for you.
I heard that same rumor. And again, I don't know if it's true, just as you don't know if it's true. I don't know.
Well, it makes for great uh, fantasizing or speculation, whatever. That would be
For
pretty
sure.
darn clever, I
And
think.
what about her? She was divorced. She has a couple of kids. She was, I think, recently married to this majorly wealthy guy,
Hmm.
and she was cheating on him. And they had just bought a house 4 months ago. So is she never going to be happy? Is she one of these women who is always up to complain about her man? I don't know. I don't know anything about her. We don't know. There, I think a lot of other things are going to come out after a while. But I really want to emphasize that these situations make it very difficult for the good ones out there, the good
Yeah.
people, the good guys, the good women who are looking to find each other and to have another life in the future with these people. And it's making it difficult for that to happen. And so we've got to end all these games and all this nonsense. We have children watching.
Is it possible that Rodney King had it right? Why can't we just all get along? Not just get along.
Well, I'm with you. Why can't we all just get along? Period.
It's really so simple in practice, and I do think, just on the way out here, that my own paradigm is that the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil, and I've concluded that it is really not the love of money, but this love of selfishness that I think is the root of all evil. I'll leave you this one thing. You're the psychologist, not me, but when I had been recently married a long, long time ago, my wife had means, and I was the breadwinner, and we had a great system where we tracked every dollar spent, and we would have a ledger, and when she spent money, it went on her ledger, and I spent money on my ledger, in an effort to get to 50-50. Seemed pragmatic to me as a immature, young, newly married person. And my father-in-law, who I had and have the greatest esteem for, he was such a wonderful, smart, pragmatic person, came to me and said, you and Helen have got it just right. You figured out how you each get 50%. He said, but I got a new paradigm for you. What if you each give the other 100%? Then wouldn't you end up at 100% rather than 50%? That thought has stayed with me for 48 years. And I have to tell you, I give my wife 100%. She gives me 100%. I'm not saying we never have our little differences, but it really simplifies things.
I love that. That's a great, great story. And I think everybody listening to this show ought to take that with them.
Well, Dr. Gilda Carle, I thank you so much for coming on. No wonder you've got millions of viewers all over the world. You've appeared on the Sally Jesse Raphael show and Howard Stern and Dateline and Court TV. I mean, what a CV you are assimilating, and so many books. I don't know how you have time to even come on our show, but it's a privilege and an honor. We thank you.
Thank you so very much, John. Good luck to you and lots of blessings, and blessings to everybody out there. Please, let's get our acts together.
Dr. Gilda, I want to have you back on soon and regularly if you'd be so kind. Have a great rest of your weekend.